Okay, good morning, and to everybody that will eventually be viewing this little video here. I was looking forward to talking to this man for quite a while. His name is Alan Fagan. He is from Louth. I've read up on a lot of guys that was running for elections, and this guy stood out because he was talking about something. He referred to it as a shadow government. I hadn't heard that now in a long, long time, so I was intrigued with it. So, Alan, thank you for coming on and spending a few minutes or whatever length of time we'll stick together here. But I want to pick your brain a bit. First of all, give us a little brief synopsis on who you are, what you do, and most importantly, after thinking about it and living your life up to this, you decided to run for election, which takes a lot of gumption indeed. You get a lot of abuse and you get no thanks. It's an expensive thing, it's a thankless thing, and it's a learning experience as to who your friends are and who they thought would have been there for you, whatever. But how? Give us a little bit of a synopsis on how you got to the point that a month ago you decided to throw your hat into the ring.
Well, I ran in the recent local elections as well, and I noticed when I put my name in the hat for the local elections, they were kind of, they go into a man's past to try and destroy him in the public view. And I was getting newspaper write-ups, I was getting this, that, and the other. They were going into my Twitter feed to see what I had tweeted and this, that, and the other. So it was a case of the media trying to destroy me during the local elections. But I noticed a massive shift in the general election. They never came near me.
Now that
You
is
know,
very interesting. You say that. Would it be a fact then that in the local election you might have been more of a threat and you might be the leading man? Because let's face it, in this general election, you were going to be, and the other lady there, and many more indeed, were going to be in the second tier. The big name, of course, was Herman. So perhaps they thought that you wouldn't be such a great danger. So in the local election, their first call of duty was to fish everything you had said in jest, in seriousness, you name it, and whatever, use it against you.
that's exactly what happened. I was invited on a radio program during the local elections, and it turned into a character assassination by the presenter because we had a protest at our biggest hotel in Drogheda, which we've lost. They're paying 25 million to new owners who only purchased the hotel for 11 million. So the purchase went through for 11 million and a contract was signed for 25 million with the Department of Integration. So they had planned to put 500 migrants into the local hotel. The fire chief said no, 250 is the maximum. So it works out now. I'm a working man. I work with the local council. And if I get overtime, I might pay €1,000 in tax a month. My monthly tax only keeps one migrant for 1 week in our biggest hotel. Now, yearly, it's a 5.4 million loss to the local economy. We have nobody that, there's people from America who used to come over to visit family here, and they'd stay in the D Hotel. The D Hotel was the centre point for any type of interaction or any holidays from people who had family living away. And that's gone now. So it's, we protested that. The local radio were down at it after calling us racist and bigots, and whoever attends is joining racist and bigots. Now, we have a problem in Ireland. We have Antifa on the left, supporting all the left-wing parties. And every time we try to speak, to be heard, to show the government that we're not happy with their decisions, we have a counter-protest turns up across the road. And it's continuous. Now, the counter-protesters do get paid. We have established that. A lot of them be students. They get offered 50 quid and maybe a free bus ticket to wherever the protest is happening, go out and ruin this for the nationalist movement. So that's what we've been getting, and it's sponsored by the government. We also had a very well-known documentary maker. He worked for Virgin Media. He also worked for News Talk. Now he arrived at the Coolock protest one day when it was it was fairly badly managed that day. There wasn't many people, but we had 3 Antifa with masks. They ran at the crowd, the few lads that were at Coolock. But in the scuffle, one of them dropped their phone, and he happened to be a very famous documentary maker. And on the phone, there was videos and photographs of him and a couple of Antifas. There was also a Muslim cleric with them. They were writing "Refugees Welcome" across the tricolour. And that's what they were doing prior to running at the lads at Coolock. But he lost his phone. His name is Paul Connolly, and he is a very well-known journalist. But this is what we're up against. We're up against the establishment every time we try and have our voices heard. The establishment sends in their minions.
Okay, well, there's a phrase that comes to my mind immediately then, and that is, there's more to this than meets the eye. You're telling me, first of all, a developer will go in and buy a hotel for $11 million, and he will get a contract or whatever. All of a sudden, it's worth $25 million. He has
$25 million over 2 years.
Over 2 years. Now, in normal society, normal business, fellow going in and making an investment on a building, he's looking to make his money back in 20 to 25 years. That is the economics of that. You're telling me that in 2 years, putting up 11 million, this guy can walk away with double the money, 25 million.
He could walk away with 14 million. Now, the contract is for a period of 2 years. I can't see that ending in 2 years because they're using the hotel at the moment as a transit hub. So they fill the hotel for a period of 60 to 90 days. The 250 people there will be moved on to more secure accommodation, which will be housing, which is taking the housing off the Irish people on the housing list.
Okay, well, that deals with the objectives of the fellow that buys the hotel there. He's a guaranteed money maker, and not just 5%, 10%. He's basically getting his money back plus in 2 years with zero risk whatsoever. That takes care of it. Now, you also mentioned the fact that there's protesters turning up. Well, they're not there, obviously, for the good of their health, and they're not there for the glory. They will get paid. Where is all this money coming from to pay these? Sometimes there's hundreds of people out. Where do the protesters get the money for the placards, the flags, their meal, their diesel, their petrol, and just to be there?
They're actually, Declan, they're heavily funded by left-wing parties, by liberals. You know, like you have the Democrats in America and the Republicans. Now, the problem in our country is it should be only a left and a right. But we have parties claiming to be centre and they're operating with left-wing politics. You know, our government only started to lean slightly centre-right coming up to the elections. And they mentioned the immigration. Our Gardaí in Ireland only increased their numbers by 50 members last year when you take away who retired, who left, who's suspended, who's under investigation. So if you look at the numbers, they've increased by 1 Garda per week over this year. And that's an issue. Now, what I was hoping to do was to set up a shadow government. Now, a shadow government will be standing on the sidelines watching everything, watching and recording everything. As soon as we see legislation that the government wants to propose, if it's detrimental to the Irish people as a whole, we will object to it through the international courts. And it's all about lodging injunctions in the High Court here, but you're using international law because our government have been in breach of international law for a long time, especially with the migrant crisis. Now, I believe George Soros is behind it. He's funding the UN and the Red Cross. And there's a lot of NGOs working in Ireland that have bases and headquarters in the like of Brussels and in other countries. So it's not only Irish NGOs. Now, the issue, your listeners mightn't realise, but we have 33,500 up to 34,000 different NGOs. An NGO is a non-government organisation. Now, the issue we have is they get $6.5 billion per year in funding. So if I was just kind of doing the maths, 33,500 NGOs, if they've 10 members in each NGO, that gives them a voting power of 1/3 of a million. Now, we had 3.7 million eligible voters in this general election. So 10% of them are made up from paid NGOs. Now, if you look at the turnout was only a little over 50%. So that gives the NGOs 20% of the vote. So 20% of the vote in this election came from NGOs that were receiving government funding.
Okay,
So they are never going to vote any other way other than government parties.
just to synopsize what you said there now, you said there's 33,000 NGOs. And if there's an average of just 10 people employed in each one, that is
Now, some
300,000
NGOs would have
people,
hundreds of employees.
hundreds of employees.
If you look at the GAA is an NGO. St. Vincent de Paul is an NGO. Then you have the Irish Wheelchair Association. You have all these different NGOs. They'll set up a charity shop to do some self-funding, but they get $6.5 billion of taxpayers' money, and they raise a further $6 billion. So the NGO business in Ireland is upwards of 12 to 13 billion per year.
Okay, and so therefore there's about 300,000 people whose entire livelihoods just derive from political agitation.
Exactly. Now, the other problem we have in Ireland is the education system. We have a group called Belong To. They're another NGO. They're behind the trans ideology. I just call that confusing kids. I don't think they should be anywhere near early learning or any type of education, because most of them are from a certain demographic community. Now, they were getting protection off our government, as in the hate speech laws, that they're a protected characteristic or group of people. And that's what they tried to bring in the hate speech laws. It's now illegal to misgender somebody in Ireland.
Now, that's slightly different to, we'll say, the hate speech laws in England, which of course are draconian, to say the least. And basically, you cannot say anything in England whatsoever. There was a famous situation there where some people were imprisoned for maybe 6 months for a very nasty rape situation. But just a regular person on Facebook, on whatever it was, the internet says, refer to these people that committed the crime as pigs or whatever. So, needless to say, somebody reported that, and they were put on trial, and the person that referred to the pig as being a pig got 2 years, but the fellow that actually was the pig only got 6 months. That is insanity. And you're telling me now that is what's being proposed in Ireland.
Yeah. Well, we have a certain judge, Judge Martin Nolan. He's in our circuit court system. He's renowned for letting people with multiple thousands of images of child pornography, and they don't do very few, less than 10% of people that goes up in front of him with any type of deviant behaviour seems to walk with a suspended sentence. Now, he would have been getting investigated if we had have got one nationalist across the line, because we have him in our sights a long time. There's migrants coming here committing crimes, and the government are saying that there's no link between migrants and crime. We had a little 8-year-old girl 2 nights ago stabbed while trying to protect her mother. Her mother, we believe, now this is not confirmed, but the father was a foreign national, the mother was Irish. And as far as I know, they'd lived in the UK, she'd moved back to Ireland with the child to try and get away from him. He found him, they moved back in together, and there was an incident the other night, and an 8-year-old child lost her life, and 2 adults gone to hospital.
That's
You
unbelievable.
know, but this is just in a normal village, New Ross in County Wexford.
Tell me this: how can these events happen? Not so much this event now because it's just fresh off the news or whatever. But we'll say the two fellows that was down there in Sligo that got their heads cut off, and the unfortunate poor lady and Offaly that got savagely killed and all that. How can these events transpire, and yet the people just seem to brush it off and continue on as if nothing happened? Is there going to be another? Well, obviously, there's going to be another incident, but will there come a day when the straw will break the camel's back? Why? Where do you see all this going?
At the moment, I can like we've had numerous Republican nationalist protests, and they were always peaceful. The only time there's ever any type of an incident is when on Garda Síochána, which is our police force, when they get heavy-handed. Now, I was at a protest and I walked along the line of guards. There was 6 or 7 without their epaulet numbers. The Garda uniform is not complete, and you cannot operate as a Gardaí unless you are wearing your identifying number. If you injure a member of the public while you're wearing your uniform and you're not in full uniform, you can be prosecuted as a private citizen. And that's what we're trying to bring in. We want to hold people accountable in their own aspect of individuality, not as a guard. If they break the law, we want them to be answerable for breaking the law, not just send a complaint to GSOC, who investigates complaints against An Garda. But I've seen a lot of illegalities here with the protests. We had a peaceful protest with over 5,000 people one time in Dublin. I happened to be with a group. We were walking up. I was heading back from my car at the time, and the group that was there decided they wanted to go up to Mountjoy Jail to see show a bit of sport for Enoch Burke. Enoch Burke's over 400 days in hospital or in prison because he refused to use pronouns in the school, the Christian school that he teaches in. So that's how draconian it's gone. He will not take back the contempt of court. He's held in contempt of court.
Well, I don't want to spend too much time on the police, but another old saying comes to my mind. The fish rots from the head down. So perhaps the man at the top of this pyramid is the problem with regards to the police force. Why a foreign national would be brought in with obviously a huge chip on his shoulder, his father having been murdered by some Irish dissidents or whatever, freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them. Is it not obvious that this individual is going to have it in for everybody? He's
Of
there
course
to.
he is.
It's on.
He's actually a former MI5 or MI6 officer.
Well, you must assume that anybody at that level is part of the intelligence services, or else they wouldn't get to that level at all.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the fact of the shadow government, if, for example, one of your colleagues or whoever happened to be elected in this past election, only one fellow that I saw really that was close, in my opinion, was the man from up in Mayo there. He did a very good run, and
Stephen Kerr.
yeah, well, I know I know that fellow's name, but I didn't want to get into him too much. But the bottom line was he was the only one that was really in the hunt down through the back straight. You know what I mean? If things had gone
Yeah.
a little different, Mayo was an unusual place. You had that fellow that was a ex-Fine Gael guy. He was running as an independent. He did get beaten, but I'm sure there was a lot of more votes there for Stephen Kerr that might, under different circumstances,
But
go his.
we the slight issue, Declan. There was one particular candidate who ran in Kerry. She happened to go to one of the rural polling booths about 8:45 on Friday night. There was still an hour and 15 minutes left to vote. Now, what happened with her, as she walked into the booth, there was a woman tearing off a polling slip off the book. they're not supposed to leave the book until the voter is standing in front of the deciding officer or person that's responsible.
Yes.
There was also 6 other polls taken off the book. They were sitting on the table. When she came in, your woman got a fright, and she mentioned it. Now, that's been reported to the Gardaí, to the election commission, and to the director of elections.
Yes, well,
Uh,
I assume you're speaking of Michelle there. I don't know. I didn't hear that story before, but
yeah,
if you're
it'll
talking
be
about a
Michelle.
fantastic woman in Kerry, there can only be one, and that's Michelle, without a shadow of a doubt. But let's say one of these people had got in, and if they are in association with you, or if they're listening to your advice or whatever, and they will then adopt this approach of now they're elected as a TD, and you wish to have them as a shadow government. Are you saying that they will not actually go into the Dáil, or will they go into the Dáil and say, okay, 99% of these bills that I've seen in the first 100 days are detrimental to the welfare of the Irish people. So obviously I'm going to oppose all 99. Are you saying they're not going to go into the Dáil at all? They're going to sit down there in Kerry or wherever and bring legal cases in the court system, which is a different ball game, I would imagine.
Well, if it was a case of myself getting elected, I would not go into the Dáil. I would not speak to any of the main parties. I might speak to some independents and ask them to join the shadow government, because if they're in opposition, they would have more power in a shadow government than going into the Dáil and playing the circus of asking questions at leaders' questions and getting no answers. So, as a shadow government, we could watch every piece of legislation detrimental to the Irish and lodge High Court injunctions. Now, the issue is financing. To finance these, Melissa Kelly is doing great work, but she can't work for free. It's not fair. So we need to be able to support Melissa with the court, with the judicial part. We have a kind of a political party, but not enough members yet. So what we want is to get a political, a military, and a judicial. Now, to talk about the military wing, that will be more to do with the Irish Environmental Defenders, where local people who care about their community will don a uniform and they will patrol their areas. So it'll be more like a community policing approach. Now, we will have, under our 1918 Constitution, we will be able to lawfully wear those uniforms. We will have the power of arrest and detention, and then we hand the suspect over to An Garda Síochána and let them do their job. But the Garda numbers are way down in Ireland. We don't have enough Gardaí to police the country with 5.3 million people and only about 14,000 Gardaí.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a moment. But I would like to mention Melissa and the other two people. To my understanding is so far that they have brought a case, well, let's call it the Mullingar case. That was not successful for whatever reason. Then they brought a case, we'll call it the Coolock case, and that actually appears to be, for the moment anyway, very successful. And it has forced the hand of the people behind it to at least cease operations for the moment. So let's call that successful. But just wanted to mention that. You said there, okay, you're going to stay out of government. Let's say there's 10 people that have been elected in the next election, we'll say. And is it not just assisting, we'll say, Fianna Fáil, if they stay out of government? Because now, instead of having 174 divided by 2, whatever it is, instead of having 80 members needed to form a government, they will only need 74, 75, or whatever. So is that not detrimental to the game plan?
It would all depend on what numbers we have as part of the shadow government. Now, obviously, we will need a spokesperson in the Dáil as part of the shadow government, because you're entitled to your questions, leaders' questions. If you're the leader or you're the representative of a shadow government, you will have a right to go into the Dáil and ask the questions that's pertinent to your voting demographic. So you might have to, but there's a thing. Our court system is under the Crown Courts at the moment. Our Gardaí are a private company with headquarters in the City of London. They're a corporation, so it's a Garda Corps where we used to have. There used to be a community policing on Garda Síochána. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in Ireland getting handed over to EU, handed over to the WEF. You know, our politicians are intertwined with this Agenda 2030. Now the climate scam as well. That's just by design. You know, they can actually make it rain heavier anywhere they want nowadays. They've a lot of technology. And the issue is they're using this as a climate scam. We're still at 0.4%, less than 0.5% of CO2 in the air. That hasn't gone up or down. If it goes down, plant life dies. If it goes up, the world will turn greener. You know, there'll be more growth. But this is the thing that we're all led to believe, and every media company is owned, bought and paid for, and they all go with the same narrative, no matter what the narrative is, be it COVID, be it climate change, be it the war in Ukraine. You know, it's all fed propaganda, and that's why they call it programming. Because if they repeat and rinse, as the news is on every 2 hours or so, it's rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So you've got the elderly people sitting at home that believe every word that television is telling them. And that's where the demographic of votes for our government are. Because the government tell our state broadcaster, RTE and Virgin Media, what to say, what the public should know today.
Moving on from that point, again playing devil's advocate, to the regular man on the street, if we'll call him that, he's going to ask the obvious question, which is, why don't the 8 members or whatever go into the Dáil? They have privileges in the Dáil. They cannot be sued for anything they say. Why don't they go in there and just ask the questions, present the evidence, or whatever? That is the public forum that they can do that, the only one that comes to mind, where they cannot be prosecuted for anything whatever they say comes into their mind. So anyway, your point of view is that you're going to stay out of the House of Parliament, the Dáil, maybe have one fellow to go in and ask questions or whatever. That is what you mean by a shadow government.
Yeah. You will have one representative that will go into the Dáil as and when necessary. But we will not be taking a Dáil seat to sit across from a government that we don't trust. You know, we can watch whatever legislation they try and pass, as in hate speech laws, as in, you know, reducing your movement like they did during COVID. Like, we have a lot of mental illness now because of the COVID lockdowns. Like, you've got teenagers there that at certain very important stages in their development, say between the age of 12 and 14, between 14 and 16, there's a development goes on between those ages. And when you lock people away and all they've got to do for 2 years is play video games, you've caused an awful lot of mental health issues in those children. They'll have social anxiety. You know, just there's a myriad of things that can happen when you lock people down. It never happened to us as children, you know, but it happened during the COVID, and a lot of it was totally unnecessary.
Earlier this evening, I watched a video. A gentleman, he's referred to as the West Awake. Anyway, that's his handle or whatever. He was interviewing the ex-journalist there, John Waters. Anyway, John Waters seemed to suggest that the population, I'll paraphrase it, the population was somewhat hypnotized. They are just in a world of their own, and they cannot just digest this information whatsoever. It is as if I don't know if he used the term, but I would refer to it as a mass psychosis. is the population just under so much stress that they just, to put it in layman's terms, they just cannot think straight anymore? Is that what you think is the situation?
It's like as if people have been dumbed down, and if you're a critical thinker in the world at the moment, you're a conspiracy theorist. It's labels. There's labels for everything, and it's all coming from the liberals, all from the left. They throw the labels at anybody, anybody that speaks the truth. Now, in County Louth here, there was 24 candidates ran for the general election. 20 of those candidates got on the largest radio station in the county. 4 nationalists weren't asked on. So how is it going to be a free and fair election when the people of Drogheda and Mid Louth did not get to hear our voices before the election?
Okay, let me. The 4 members that were not invited on was yourself, the lady Tracy O'Mahony. Have I her name correct?
Tracy O'Hanlon,
O'Hanlon. Okay, I'm getting confused with another one.
Herman Kennedy, and Derek McIlerney.
Okay, Derek McIlerney is the last fellow's name?
Yeah.
Okay. It's very strange that Herman Kelly wasn't invited to the program, because, just regardless of what anybody's opinion of Herman Kelly is, he ended up, I believe, at the end of by the elimination stage with something like 3,600 votes. That's a heck of a lot of people for a local radio station to shun.
Yeah.
So obviously they must have been told by somebody, hey, don't put that guy on there.
Well, what I've seen, Declan, they're afraid of me, the media, because I will say what I feel, and I will not apologise. If I feel it in me gut that it's right and it has to be said, I'll say it. Now, what I found this time, I think with the attacks that I got by the media during the local elections, they thought we'll finish any aspirations Alan Fagan has of becoming a politician. So they tried to destroy me in the media, bringing up stuff 30 odd years
Of course,
in
yeah.
me, historical stuff, and to bring that up to try and paint a narrative to make me out to be a person that I'm not. The person sitting in front of you today is not the person that would have sat in front of you 30 years ago. So this is what I'm looking at. So all of a sudden, there's the election's called, there's 3 weeks to the election. So I think to myself, sure, why not? I went up with my €500 deposit and I put my name on the ballot. Now, it was more dipping the toe in the water just to see how it went. I would have expected 3 times what I got in the local elections. I would have expected up to 500 votes, but it didn't materialise. I ended up with 116. I didn't do leaflets, I didn't do posters. But there's other candidates across the country on the nationalist side that did do posters and did do canvassing and worked very hard up to the elections. So there was very little difference. It was all across the board that the nationalists did not get the vote.
Yes, well, I cannot follow every candidate, but I was following the fellow there up in Coolock, Kevin. He got something like 500 votes, and in the local election, he got something like 1,100 votes. Now, I could be a little bit wrong, but that's the general gist of it anyway. The local elections, a much, much smaller electorate, much smaller pool.
It's like putting your fish hook into a fish bowl for the locals and putting it into a lake for the general.
Yes, it's not a case of he got half the number of votes. Pro rata, he got probably a quarter or maybe a fifth of the number of votes, if not even more so. So maybe there was a bit of skullduggery involved. I also came across people complaining about that fellow that makes the videos there, Philip, and he got 1 vote from Newtown Mount Kennedy. I thought that was, if it's true, if it's real, I thought that was pretty amazing, because you've got a complete town. This fellow, in their view, must not be coming in to help them. Now, in his view, of course he's coming in to help them, but if you can only get 1 vote, there is something amiss in either their perception of him or their perception of reality or whatever.
It has to be, because I travelled to Newtown Mount Kennedy myself during the, when they started trying to put a plantation there. And Philip was given, Philip's a citizen journalist, he was given plenty of publicity to what was going on around the country at different protests. But the issue we have going forward, because I believe that this election was interfered and tampered with in a big way. In a big way. Now, the Nationalists did get a good number of votes. You know, if you add up all the Nationalists that ran, it's double what it was in 2020. But there was probably double or triple the candidates. Now, going forward, when we get our military wing of the Irish Environmental Defenders, which I hope we can get uniforms within the next 3 to 6 months, and start patrolling our neighbourhoods. Now, when the next election is called, I want the Irish Environmental Defenders to be able to see the empty boxes going to the polling station and make sure they're empty before the seal goes on them. We will also have 2 men there for half a day. We will have 2 more men there for the other half of the day in every polling booth in the country. And this is the only way to take our country back, to make sure there's no skullduggery. So we have independent observers who happen to be Irish Environmental Defenders. Now, when the ballots are leaving, we will be checking the van that they're going into, and the van will be followed to the holding centre. We will also have a couple of men in the count centres with An Garda Síochána overnight. There will be no skullduggery in the next election, because we will make sure that we police it ourselves. And that, I think, going forward, is the only way that we're going to have a free and fair election in Ireland. As I say, you have 1/3 maybe up to 500,000 voters who receive a paycheck from government through their NGOs. So that's the battle we're fighting. And this is by design. These NGOs were all allowed to set up. Now, if you're an NGO and you're on the left, or you're encouraging migrants, or you're encouraging weird education in schools, you will get funding. You will get it like that. But if you're a nationalist and you want to set up an NGO, and it's basically just an NGO that looks after the national interest, you won't get a penny. You won't even be, you won't be entertained. So what we have is, if you're left liberal and you have an idea and you approach the government with your idea and you look for funding, you're another NGO just been set up. But if you go with Republican ideals, they won't want to know. They will not entertain you. I don't know any right-wing NGOs in Ireland out of the whole 33,500.
With regards voter tampering there, with tampering with the votes, you bring up a very good point. And usually when people say, oh, well, where were they overnight? They're focused on the overnight, and they're focused on the trip from the polling station to the counting centre and that time period. But obviously, if there's tampering to be done, as you just brought up there, you're the first one that brought it up, the tampering would obviously be done bringing the box to the polling station. It's not empty. It's already half filled with made out ballots.
That's
And
exactly what my point would be, that we need to make sure they're empty.
Who needs those expensive electronic voting machines if you can just do it the old-fashioned way? And
yeah.
I think 99 out of every 100 people would have overlooked that. That's the weak link in the process from start to finish. You actually start off halfway to the finish line if you are the local candidates, or if you're not the local candidate, if you are the favored candidate.
If you're the preferred candidate.
The favored or the preferred. That's a fascinating thing. That is amazing.
So as far as I'd see, we escort from the night before or the early in the morning, when the boxes start getting dispatched, before they seal any box, we want to make sure it's empty.
Yes, at the start of the day.
And we want to make sure that the back of the van that they're getting delivered in is empty before they go into it.
At the start of the day at 7 a.m. when the voting begins, you just open that box and hey, it's empty. Let's go.
Yeah,
Sounds
exactly that.
sounds so easy.
It is simple, but we will have the volunteers now. The way the Irish Environmental Defenders, as in the community policing unit, will work, there will be worried fathers and uncles and aunties and whoever else wants to put the uniform on. They're just worried about their area. It's maybe the demographic has changed and you've got 40% of people that you never had before. And they're not from our culture, they're not from our religion. So you've got all these people planted. It obviously puts fear into people because people do fear Islam. They fear the different cultures that come. Now, I've always said we're not inherently racist, and for me, it's not about colour. I'd happily talk to any man or woman of any colour, but it's culture. Now, everybody has their own culture. Chinese have their own culture. Japanese, everybody. But when you have a culture like an ideology where it's coming from the Middle East, and when they get the numbers, then they want to change your laws. They want to change how a community operates, as in Sharia law. And it's happened all over the UK, and we don't want that here. You know, it's dangerous for a Christian country to have Islam coming and taking over. For 12 to 1400 years, Christianity and Islam have never gelled, ever. So we're in danger, as is, if they don't reduce the numbers and put a cap on the numbers of people entering the country.
Now, 6 months ago, if you had suggested that it would be possible to get people out on what we might call a local community policing or uh, a local community watch, WATCH, I'd say no way. People are too busy watching whatever they're watching on TV. But you think in the last 6 months, people have become more nervous. Let's put it like that. I hear a lot of reports of people afraid to go out at night. I've someone was reporting about that. I just saw it on a post someplace or whatever. He says he's a grown man. He's 6 foot tall. He's 15 stone. He's afraid to walk down the streets of Longford. That's just happened to be where he's from at night. And people are saying that could not be happening. That is reality, I guess, 6 months on.
It's going to be a bigger reality in 6 months' time. If you go into Dublin City now, there's less than 50% Irish born. Less than 50%. And in Drogheda here, we're the biggest town in the country. We have to be at 40%, approaching 40%, or just gone over 40%. There's a lot of money getting thrown at people. There is a lot of Georgian type buildings in Drogheda, and they've been let go run down over the years. Now, all of a sudden, there's any amount of money to get these places back into working order. The issue that I have as an Irish nationalist and a Republican is that we have nearly 15,000 on our homeless list now. Some in emergency accommodation. There's up to 2,000 people sleeping rough on a nightly basis in the country. Now, in all sorts of weathers. What our government has proven over the last 4 years or 5 years is that they could have solved our housing crisis at any given time. Because if you can house 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 from other areas in a short space of time, put them in a hub first, and then when you procure accommodation for them, they're moved on. So they're getting into houses ahead of the Irish people who have paid taxes, whose parents have paid taxes, and whose grandparents have paid taxes. The people who built the country are getting crapped on. That's the only way of putting it.
I think
You
you
know,
mentioned.
and
I think you mentioned a phrase at some stage, maybe before this, about common sense. You say you pay €1,000 a week or whatever, a month or whatever it is, and it'll just house one person.
yeah,
How can it be viewed as common sense, where you would be asked to house anybody whatsoever out of your pocket when you should be busy housing your granny or your cousin or who the heck knows.
Well,
Where does this come from?
even even myself, Declan, at 53 years of age, I'm private rental. I'm renting off a private landlord.
You're telling me that you don't own your own home, you're just a fellow paying rent, and you're paying rent to the landlord. That is all very well and good. Above and beyond paying rent to the landlord, you've also got to pay rent to the government so they can pay some other landlord to put whoever into a nice apartment or flat. Or what.
Exactly. Now, what the issue is in Ireland at the moment with the way the migrant scam is going, now I call it human trafficking. There's no other word for it. It's basically illegal human trafficking being overlooked by the government because it's being pushed by NGOs. And that's basically it. NGOs are breaching all the rules. We had an NGO involved in childcare. Now, you know what TUSLA is. TUSLA is
Yes,
the National Child and
protection
Family
service,
Agency.
if it is, yeah.
Now, 22 children up to October this year went missing in their care. 200 children have died under their care or that has been on their books in the last 10 years. Our Children's Minister, Roderick O'Gorman, he just barely got re-elected for the Green Party. He's the only Green Party TD in the next Dáil. He shredded files on missing children. There was one African child, aged 13 or 14. She came here. She wasn't seen for almost 2 years, and they found her in a brothel. And this is, it's human trafficking, it's sex trafficking. The other thing that we're not having here, we're not means testing these people. Now, I've noticed a lot of the migrants that are the economic migrants coming from the UK, they're driving cars that are not too old, but they're also getting their accommodation and their food paid for. Now, I have to, out of my wage, I have to pay me rent first. I pay my car second. And then I have my utility bills after that, my TV package, and you've got your car insurance, your road tax. So you have all of these things getting squeezed out of you, and there's not enough coming in sometimes. That when they squeeze, the sponge is dry, and that's the issue we have. Like, for us to have a movement. Now, Tracy O'Hanlon came up with a brilliant idea. She said, surely we've got 500,000 patriots in the country, which I would assume it's only 10%. But surely 10% of us are still Irish nationalists and we care about the country. If we could get that 500,000 or even 250,000 people to do a direct debit of €1 a month, we could have a 250 to 300,000 per month to work off, as in printing up leaflets, making the public aware of what's really happening in government, and make the people aware of that. And we can do leaflet drops. We have our community police force, and we're doing that for the next 4 years. By the time the next election comes around, everyone's going to know who we are and what we're about, and the fact that we are the people that are actually helping you on a daily basis. The government are only making decisions detrimental to your pocket, detrimental to your mental health. There's 500,000 hidden homeless in Ireland. And even if we got them on board, that's 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds living in their mother's house because they cannot afford private rental. There's no availability of private rental, or either or. There's a myriad of reasons why they're stuck in their mothers. And the main thing is unaffordable rents and not enough supply of housing. Now, the government that have all promised to build 300,000 houses over 5 years, which is 60,000 a year. In 2008 and 2009, they were building 90,000 units. So that was during the Celtic Tiger, just before the crash. So if they could build 90,000 then, what's wrong now? A lot of our builders happen to be tied up in factory building, like the other type of construction, not house building. And then the amount of builders that's tied up with the renovations of these buildings for bypass use. So they'll spend hundreds of thousands on each building, possibly into the millions. They will do it up, but they will do it up so that it has dormitories. Because men equals money. The more you can squeeze in, the bigger the check you get at the end of the month. And what we have now is we have vultures coming in, buying up buildings that they know are needed for IPAS. But we still have 15,000 of our own people. There was a program on the TV, and I don't know if they did it as a PSYOP, psychological operation, but they put an African girl who had recently just been given a house in County Wicklow. They had her sitting beside an Irish girl who lived here all her life and has a child with special needs. The African woman didn't go on the housing list. She got a call, obviously, from an NGO, and NGOs are controlling the housing bodies here as well. The housing agencies are NGOs. The councils are buying up a block of apartments or an estate. But then they hand over the management and the distribution of those buildings to another NGO. Now, if this NGO is left leaning, it's obviously going to be more than 50% migrants. We have no right-leaning NGOs. That's what the issue is in this country. Everything is run by the left, for the left, and we don't matter, and that's it's an awful bugbear, because there's a hell of a lot of good people in this country that just want to stand up, speak out, and say, no, this has to stop. And I'm one of them. And there's a lot more people along with me that just want this to stop before we lose our country. If you get to 40%, it's game over. You'll never, ever get your demographic back.
I've listened to a lot of people in the last few days saying that the electoral path is no longer viable whatsoever, because it ain't going to happen. Because you're running against a clock that's ticking against you. The number of people that are coming in that are not indigenous or whatever, they are never going to vote for a nationalist, because why should they? They're not stupid. So perhaps your plan, you as in plural, could be viable. It is, to my mind, no different from what the separatists did in 1608 when they left England and went over to Holland. They just separated. So nowadays you don't need to go to Holland. But you're suggesting somewhat of a separation to build up your own anti-society, if you want to call it that. A mirror of this society, but just on that society.
But
That's an interesting.
the new society will be actually the old society, as in the society you grew up in and I grew up in Ireland, where everything was community. Like, you need to go from grassroots upwards. So you build the communities, you build the trust in the communities as a movement. And once the people see, now I have another thing that I'm going to be doing, Declan, as well, is I'm calling it Free Labour Saturday. And it's going to be a community-based approach, where if there's an elderly person who cannot get out of her house because the steps are there longer than her invalidity is. You know what I mean? So
Yes,
I want to be able to go put a ramp in, a concrete ramp with a handrail for elderly people that cannot get out at certain times of the year, to give them that freedom. Now, all work will be free. It'll be non-profit. It'll work on donations, and it'll work on donations from like a plant company, a concrete company. And that's what I want, a community-based approach. I will look for council funding, but I will not take government funding.
That sounds like a wonderful idea.
That in itself is a way to build up a community, to build up a movement. It'll be like a community-based project where people in the community get together for half a day on a Saturday to do a footpath, or a garden, clear weeds out. It doesn't matter what the job is, but if I can get enough of volunteers on board, we want to help the elderly. The elderly are being ignored in this country. They're the main voting demographic of the main parties, because they get promised that your pension is going to go up 20 quid a year for the next 5 years, or 10 or 12 a year. So they get sucked into that. Everybody goes by how their pocket is, and that's the worst case scenario. Like, money is the root of all evil, and I've never had any aspirations to ever having a great deal of money. As long as I have enough money to pay what I have to pay on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, I'm happy out. But I want to make a difference going forward, as in how this country is managed. And there's mismanagement with the government that keeps getting in. They've mismanaged us now for 100 years. You know, we don't have our sovereignty. They don't care about our sovereignty. We had the Micheál Martin, when he was the Taoiseach, standing down at Michael Collins Memorial in Bala and saying now is not the idea for a backward looking thing like Irish sovereignty. And 2 weeks later, he went on the news. Now is the time to show Ukraine support as a sovereign nation. So who's he working for? He's not working for the Irish people. He's telling us that the Irish sovereignty is not important, but less than 2 weeks later, he's telling us that we have to support the sovereign state of Ukraine. Now, I don't agree with any of that.
Okay, so in your position, you're paying rent to your landlord. You're paying rent to the government so they can pay rent to another landlord to house whoever. And now you're telling me that you've got to make another payment to the government who will give it to some other fellow over in Ukraine so they can buy some nice jets that'll get blown up next week.
Exactly. And our government have pledged 226 million in aid to Ukraine.
Out of your pocket, but not out of their own, of course.
No, out of the taxpayers' coffers.
Well, in actual fact, it's actually only a small amount out of the taxpayers. It's even worse than that. They're not taking it out of the taxpayers, because if they took it out of the taxpayers would actually wise up and realize what's going on. They're taking it out of a gigantic credit card. And the debt of Ireland now, which was 15 years ago $60 billion, is now 270, give or take, $billion.
Yeah.
If the Irish people actually had to pay for this largesse, they would have revolted 10 years ago. But unfortunately, they were unaware of just how deep a hole that they have been tossed into. And that debt, of course, is now coming due. Even as we speak, the government of France seems to be falling because the debt load is too great. So the music appears to be coming to an end. So it is going to be fascinating to watch indeed.
Yeah. Well, when the banks got bailed out in Ireland to the tune of 60 or 80 billion, that put every Irish man, woman and child in 44 grand of debt.
Exactly. And now it is 4 times as large. So it's probably in a round figure 200,000, which of course is unpayable because Irish people don't have a spare 200,000 euros.
And if an
But
Irish
it's
person
still
has
on the ledger book as being old.
Yeah. If you have 200,000 euro in Ireland, you're still going to be lucky to get on the housing ladder. They handed out voting cards this year in Ireland from January up to November. They handed out 476,059 voting cards. 115,000 of those was done after the election was called. So nobody was asked for voter ID when they went. Other people went to vote and they were told that they'd already voted. Their name was crossed off. So this is where I'm getting back to Michelle Keane's video, where she's seen 7 ballots torn off the book, 1 in the process of being torn and 6 sitting on the desk. Now, if the people that are in the polling stations, the adjudicators, when you come to vote, if they have political leanings towards one or other party, what's to stop them being deceitful all day during the election? Now, even if we get to the box being empty before it arrives, we will not take our eyes off any boxes in the next election.
Another question that has been raised a lot is people are saying that, we'll say in County Louth, for example, there was 24 candidates. People are saying this is crazy. Why don't they all get behind one nationalist candidate? What is your views on that? Because the people say, "Oh, we're splitting the vote," but
Yeah, I find with a lot of the nationalists, Declan, there's a lot of ego with some of them. Now, I parked my ego a long, long time ago because pride will kill a man, and you just need to work for the greater good, regardless what your individual perception is or your individual feelings. Sometimes you have to park your feelings aside and work towards a greater goal. And what I find is, now Herman Kelly did very well, but Herman has a very big ego, bordering probably on a bit of narcissism. That's in my opinion, and I don't mind saying that to Herman. But Herman came out and did a video the other night, and he complained about the idiots that ran for the nationalist ticket. So he was including me in that, because he said they didn't canvass. But the issue with Herman spent €16,000 on his campaign. Now Herman fell short of getting that refunded by a couple of hundred votes. So obviously he wants to point the finger, at other people. So he pointed at the other three nationalists that ran in Louth. Now, I only ran on the ticket this time thinking, sure, look, I might put a spanner in the works. I thought I was going to get attacked by the media. I got totally left alone by all media. Nobody approached me. I got onto one radio station for about a half an hour, and I spoke for maybe 15 minutes, and that was it. Whereas the main broadcaster here, RTE and Virgin Media, they actually followed Jerry the Monk Hutch around. Jerry's a former criminal, but he's never been convicted of a crime. So what happened was, I noticed there was a psyop. We had a very good man with Malachy Steenson running. Malachy was behind the protest movement from the very start, up in East Wall in the telecom building. So Malachy turned up to most of the protests and organised a good number of them. Herman would have been there as well. Jerry the Monk Hutch was nowhere to be seen. But then all of a sudden, when Jerry says, I'm going to run in the election, on Garda Síochána go over to Spain, and all of a sudden Jerry is arrested and put in custody. Now, luckily, he had the financing and the wherewithal to get himself out on bail. So when he came back and they knew they couldn't stop him from running, they got behind him. But that was a psyop. The reason the media got behind Jerry and were promoting Jerry is because every vote that Jerry got was taken from Malachy Steenson's voter base. They did not want, as they call Malachy, a far-right activist in the Dáil. So they promoted Jerry Hutch as much as they could. They even done a three-part podcast with one of our crime correspondents here, and they promoted Jerry up to the hill. So all of a sudden then Jerry runs and Jerry gets more votes than Malachy. But if Jerry didn't run, nearly every vote Jerry got would have went to Malachy Steenson, and we would have had one nationalist in the Dáil. That didn't happen. So this is how they play the voting public here. It's all a psyop. You see the main parties going canvassing, they have cameras with them. Cameras everywhere, promoting them. You have a nationalist going canvassing, there's nobody around. Bar another couple of nationalists maybe giving you a dig out. But you have no media coverage, so you're shadow banned. Like, I'm shadow banned. If I put something up on Facebook, it's only seen by a couple of dozen people. Same with TikTok. I'm after getting thrown off TikTok with 5,000 followers because I was starting to get popular, and it was all anti-immigrant protest videos that I was putting up because I was actually there on scene. And all of a sudden then, I'm not getting seen. I put something up and there's very little views. So I know I'm shadow banned on most social media. Now, I haven't broken any laws in things that I've said on Twitter or things that I've said on Facebook, because nobody knocked on my door with an arrest warrant. So I think I've survived saying things too out there to come to the attention of the law, or well, the laws in this country at the moment are all legislation. Everything is legislation. If you go to the law of the land, or you go back to maritime law or common law, half of these laws didn't exist then. So it's legislation, and they call it law, and expect us to adhere to it. You know, and whatever they want to push, they will push on the Irish people, whether we like it or not.
You are correct on that. But anyway, the law is a bit too complicated for regular people. It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
So tell me a little, just before we sign off, that other lady that ran against you, I saw her in a video with you, and she spoke very eloquently, and she was very presentable, and she came across as a very intelligent person. Just give me a little bit brief on her story, because she actually came. I don't know anything about her except that she looked to be a fantastic candidate.
Yeah. Now, Tracy's a mother of 4 children. She's a lone parent at the minute. She cares about her community. She cares about Dundalk. She lives, she's from Dundalk, but lives just over the border in Uri. Now, the reason Tracy got involved in politics, she was with the Irish Freedom Party first, but she was just sick of the way things were going. The way any extra money or any extra facilities in any place across the country was being given up for people that never paid 1 red cent in this country. So we had economic migrants coming, we had scammers coming, we had people being human trafficked by the NGOs, and Tracy wanted to stand up against it. Tracy would normally sing the Irish national anthem after each protest, and she's a good, solid Irish woman. I've met her mother. Her mother's lovely as well, a good patriot. Now, Tracy stood up. Myself and Tracy went up to LMFM, the local radio station, last Thursday, which was 1 day before the elections. We walked into reception. We asked, why had you got 20 out of 24 candidates on your show? Why no nationalist voices heard on this radio? I said, are you woke FM, or what has gone wrong? Oh, we couldn't fit anybody in. We couldn't fit everybody in. So I said, so you only admitted the 4 nationalist candidates who have a right to be heard by the people of County Louth, with the election being tomorrow. Well, you won't be going on the radio. That's what they told us. So we went outside, and Tracy did a video, and she just said that they gave us a rubbish excuse as when we went into the radio station and asked why weren't we not asked on? Do we not have a right as candidates in a democracy to have our voices heard? And we were told no, we weren't going on, and that was it.
I'm wrapping it up now a little bit because we've gone an hour and 10 minutes or whatever. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about culture. And people will ask me why I didn't ask about culture. What do you consider a way to promote the Irish language and the learning and the appreciation of Irish history, for example?
Well, there's a lot of good audio kind of books now that you can learn different languages through.
Yeah.
But to kind of learn Irish, your best bet is to go to the Gaeltacht. You know, is to visit the west of Ireland and actually go to a community where you can't speak anything other than it for a couple of weeks.
But your grouping would find it view it as important to at least try to learn some Irish. That's the question I'm asking. Not actually how do you learn Irish, but how important it is for any Irish nationalist. I frequently see people saying, "Oh, you're supposed to be a nationalist, but you cannot speak your own language."
Yeah,
that is an important thing, a sticking point for many nationalists, I think.
it would be, but what you have to look at as well is a lot of nationalists spent a lot less time in school than the elite. Than
That is
than
true.
our politicians that went to third level education and spent their summers in the Gaeltacht, while nationalists were out getting their fingernails dirty, mixing concrete and building blocks, or fishing. In my case, I was a fisherman for 30 years, and I loved it. So hard work is. There's a certain demographic. It seems to be the right are the hard grafters. I don't see anyone with pink or blue hair on the building site. But what I do see is I see hard-working men, actual men. And, when I look at the left in Ireland, there was a thing on last year. It was Let Women Speak. And what it was, women wanted to speak about their experiences in the Magdalen laundries and of the adoption places that they were in. And a left-wing group arrived, the usual paid Antifas, arrived and started screaming, dog whistling, loud hailing, because they did not want these natural women to be allowed to speak. So there's where we're at. We've got the loony liberal left over here as well, Declan. Don't think they're just in America.
I guess they're all over. All right,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to leave it at that because the morning is fast approaching. Thank you
I'd
very
get to work
much,
now.
and
Thanks, Declan.
we will talk again, and I'll see can I upload this or do whatever I can do with it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Declan. Cheers.